Hey, this is Mike Robbins. Thanks so much for joining me for this episode of the podcast. I hope you're doing well. You, your family, your team, everyone around you. I want to talk today about what if it doesn't have to be so hard? Now, I've talked about some things in this regard over the years here on the show, but I had another insight on a recent run. I feel like many of my episodes over the last several weeks have come from insights while I'm running. But over the weekend, I was doing my normal weekend run, and I time myself, I sort of challenge myself, and I talked about this a month or so ago. But some mornings, I feel better than others. Some mornings I'm making better time than others, and I often will sort of, there's about a 6 minute mark in my little 20-minute run that I kind of have a sense on how it's going. And it was going pretty well, even though I wasn't feeling great. But I had this sense of like, let me really push myself and see if I can get to the marker point sort of at the end of my run um, in 18 minutes instead of 20, which I think my best one ever was like 17:39 or whatever. I wasn't going to try to push myself to do my best time ever, but I thought think I can do it in 18. I was feeling good. So I'm going and going. And right around, I don't know, 12 or 13 minutes into my run, I kind of hit the wall a little bit. And I thought, you know what? There's a few little markers along the way that I sort of can track where I'm at. And I just sort of stopped and decided to walk for a little bit. And then, got to sort of the next marker after I'd walked for about 45 seconds and caught my breath and then thought, okay, now I'm just going to see if I can do it in 19 minutes. And again, I'm just playing these little mind games with myself. Maybe you can relate. Maybe you do this sometimes when you work out. But I get to another point, another marker, and then, look down at my phone, at my timer, and realize, wow, like I'm, ahead of my little schedule. So I stop again and I walk again because I've sort of gotten pretty winded. And then I decide to run again. And long story short, I end up making it to the end right at 18 minutes, which I wasn't expecting to do after I had stopped to walk a couple of times. And I started laughing out loud as I was sort of, you know, jogging a little wind down my last 2 minutes. Again, this is just a 20-minute run. I mean, we're talking about, I don't know, 2.5 miles or so. Um, but as I was reflecting on it, I thought to myself, this is so interesting. I'm someone who definitely focuses a lot on goals and outcomes and objectives and benchmarks and things like that, as do many people I know and coach and lots of the teams and leaders that I work with, right? Those things matter in life, in business. Where are we at for the month? Where are we at for the quarter? Where are we at for the year? And whether you run your own small business like I do, or you manage a team of people inside a large corporation, or anywhere in between, right? Goals and objectives and outcomes are part of our life, right? And even if it's not about, business and, quarterly earnings or anything like that, it could simply just be we have certain goals and objectives that we want to accomplish in our lives personally, with our families, with our health, with, lots of things, right? And I did an episode a while back on some of the paradoxes of hard work. And I'm somebody who, considers myself to be a pretty hard worker, feels like I've worked hard over the course of my life and I continue to work hard. It's something that gets reinforced and celebrated in our society, which again, there is definitely some value in hard work, for sure. And as we all know, like a lot of things, there are paradoxes. There's also a dark side to hard work. Workaholism is something that gets celebrated in our society in a way that, alcoholism doesn't, or other things like that, right? And, being a workaholic, being obsessed with working hard, again, there is value in that. We want people around us on our teams. We want the people in our lives to be able to put forth effort. I have a background as an athlete, like hard work and training, but also in the game itself. It's like that mattered to me then. It matters to me now. I appreciated playing with guys who were hard workers and were willing to put in the effort to do what it really took to win. At the same time, I think we can get caught in this obsession with not only hard work, but just things being hard. And again, there are paradoxes in this. One of my favorite podcasts that exists is, our friends Glennon Doyle and Abby Wambach and Amanda Doyle have the great podcast We Can Do Hard Things. I think they have a new book coming out with that title as well. And I think focusing on being able to do hard things, focusing on being able to acknowledge when something is hard, be real about the challenges that we're facing or the difficulties maybe that are coming up. There are definitely aspects of my life at times that feel really hard. But what if it doesn't have to be so hard? That's what I was thinking about over the weekend on my run. I mean, after I got to the end, actually accomplished my goal, not exactly in the way that I thought, but I did it in 18 minutes and I stopped twice to walk. Did that count? Right? I was sort of grappling with that a little bit. And maybe what if I didn't have to push myself completely all the way the whole time and I could take a break, I could take a rest, I could adjust, I could pivot, which by the way is what happens along the path of every important goal that we accomplish in life. It's never a straight line. I was having a conversation with some friends of mine at dinner last night, and we were talking about artificial intelligence and just, some of the fears that are out there about what does it mean and how's it going to change life and work and is it going to put all these people out of work, as well as some of the excitement about what is possible in ways, just some of my friends are currently using artificial intelligence and what might be available as it gets more sophisticated. And the truth is, and I've talked about this a few times here on the show, I don't know all that much about AI, to be honest, but I am feeling both excited and scared about it on a lot of different levels. But as I was thinking about the conversation at dinner last night with my friends, I was also reflecting on, what if this major change and disruption and significant transformation in how we operate and communicate and do business and how technology works and all the things that we're told that AI is going to be and is already starting to be to some degree, what if it doesn't have to be hard? And again, I'm not trying to minimize it. I have no knowledge. I'm not a futurist, but like, what if it doesn't have to be so difficult and destructive? And I'm not in control of that. You're not in control of that. We're not in control of that. But we do have dominion over how we think about, talk about, and relate to things. And I think sometimes we don't realize how impactful our thoughts and our words are about stuff, right? Things aren't inherently the way that they are, right? I talk to lots of people these days, parents of teenagers like us who have kids off in college. And again, like everyone's experience is different, but some people I talk to, it's really hard for them when their kids go off to college, right? And I totally respect and admire that. Some people I talk to, it's not hard at all. And in fact, they're really enjoying having their kids off in college. And again, multiple things can be true at the same time. Like I personally feel really proud of and grateful for our daughter Samantha doing what she's done to put herself in a position to go to college and be at a great school like Cal Poly that she loves and all the things, right? Proud of her, excited for her. And yes, of course, I miss her and it's different and life has changed significantly and all the things. But like, she's happy. I'm happy. We're happy. It's exciting. I mean, she's 4 hours from us. Again, I get that there are different circumstances. And I also realize it's an incredible honor and an incredible privilege to be able to go to college, to have the resources to send our daughter to college. I am aware of that to the degree that I can be. But again, how we relate to things has a lot to do with how those things show up for us and our experience of them. I was talking to a friend the other day about aging and getting older. And his story about aging is actually a lot healthier, I would say, and more positive than mine is. And I was just appreciating listening to him talk about aging and getting older and how he loves all these different stages of life. And he looks at old photos of himself and remembers himself then and thinks about himself now. And he just like, it's cool, it's fun, it's exciting. And I was like, wow, that's such a different perspective than I have. And I actually appreciate it. I admire it. I'd like to take on some of that myself. And so much of things being hard, again, there are things that come up in life that pretty universally and inherently can be challenging, right? And I'm not trying to sugarcoat that or minimize it. This is not a conversation about toxic positivity that, like, hey, everything's awesome, everything's great. No. I mean, right? We go through loss, we go through grief, we go through difficulty or significant change or whatever the case may be. And that can be hard. There's a lot of, you know, uncertainty in the world right now with respect to artificial intelligence, what's happening politically, socially, some of the, economic volatility. Those things can be really hard. But underneath the hard, what is it really? It's like, oh, I'm feeling scared. Okay, that's different, by the way. Scary doesn't necessarily have to be hard. Scary can be scary. But I think a lot of times things can actually be easier than we think. And that doesn't mean that we're going to bypass the difficult thing or not lean into it or not tell the truth or not be honest. But it doesn't necessarily have to be difficult, painful, challenging, intense. Those are things I think we often bring to it, right? And we often make sometimes difficult or challenging situations even more challenging by how we think about it, talk about it, relate to it. So remembering the power of our mind, the power of our perspective is super important. And again, I know it can be hard when things are challenging. So again, there's a lot of paradox in what I'm talking about. So what are some specific things that we can do when it does seem like life is hard, when it does seem like this situation is difficult, right? Like I'm working with a couple companies right now where they're going through, major integrations, two companies coming together, or major change and disruption or reorganization. Those things, again, can often be very challenging. Lots of people I'm talking to are sitting on pins and needles right now, waiting to see what's going to happen with some of the things that are happening with respect to government cuts or changes on that front, with tariffs or what's happening in the economy. Again, depending on when you're listening to this or watching this, you may know what I'm talking about because it's happening right now, or this may have been something that took place long in the past, depending on again when you're listening or watching to this. But like these things that are going on, what does that mean? How is that changing the way that I think, the way that I work, what may happen, what the future holds? I remember hearing a few months back at an event that I was at, a woman was up speaking, and she said this really simple but profound thing to me. She said, let your future self worry about those future problems. And I thought, wow, how much time and energy do I waste currently worrying about things in the future that I can't control, instead of trusting that whatever happens, I trust that when I get to that point, whatever's going on, I'll be able to handle it. I'll be able to respond to it. You know how I know that? Not because I'm somehow superhuman, but because I've responded to and handled everything that's come up in my life up to this point. So have you, so have all of us. Now, it hasn't always been easy. Sometimes it's been bumpy and painful, but we rise up. We're incredibly resilient as human beings. So, what can we do? Here are some practical things that we can do when things do seem hard. How do we shift authentically our mindset, our approach, so that maybe it doesn't have to be so hard? The first thing that we can do that's super important when something comes up that's challenging, or we find ourselves in the midst of circumstances or situations that we deem hard or difficult, see if you can go beneath the hard. What's the actual emotion or set of emotions that are there? Is it fear? Is it anger? Is it sadness? Is it hurt? Is it disappointment? Right? Those more difficult emotions, the ones we consider negative, and I don't love those emotions myself, but when we actually tell the truth about them, when we actually allow ourselves to feel them, when we can really be honest, again, first and foremost with ourselves, and ideally with at least someone or some of the people involved in the situation, it can liberate us. Fear is just fear. Sadness is just sadness. Anger is just anger. You and I and everybody that we know has experienced those emotions, just like joy and love and gratitude and excitement. But we can tap into them. And when we tell the truth, oh, I'm feeling scared. Even on my little run the other day when I got tired, it's like, I don't know if I can keep up this pace. My body is starting to tell me, stop, slow down. And so I did. And I took a walk for 45 seconds, caught my breath, and then kept running. And eventually got to the end of the thing anyway and was able to accomplish it in the amount of time I wanted to. And it wasn't as hard as I thought. But the thing that was coming up was fear, was worry, was stress about, can I keep this up? What might happen? And again, that's a silly little example, but that's what happens in life when things seem really hard. Most of us trust we can handle it in the moment. What we fear is I can't handle this for another day, another week, another month, another year, another 5 years, whatever we think. What if it never goes away? Right? Sometimes when you get sick and in the middle of being sick, you're like, oh, I don't like being sick, but there's that weird irrational fear that like, what if this never goes away? What if I'm sick forever? What if I die? And look, I mean, people die. Sometimes someone gets sick and they do die. So it's not a completely irrational thought, even though you got a cold, you got the flu, usually most of the time in all of our lived experience up to this point, we've been okay. But when something shows up that's hard, that's difficult, that's challenging, see if you can kind of lower the waterline on the iceberg a bit, go down into the truth of what are you actually feeling, because that can start to liberate you from it a bit. And at minimum, what we tend to do is tell a bunch of stories that don't serve us. My counselor Eleanor likes to say, feel the feeling, drop the story. So if we just let ourselves feel what we're feeling, we can move through it. A second thing we can do is start to pay attention to the words that we use. And again, I'm not talking about making stuff up. I'm not talking about being the word police, but saying things over and over again about how hard it is and how difficult it is and how challenging it is and how intense it is. While that may be true to a certain degree, those words have power and they tend to reinforce it. So just using words like interesting or unbelievable or wow, like I remember years ago, I was at this workshop and someone said, when someone asks you, how's business or how's life? And you say, unbelievable. That's a really great way to respond, if that's true, obviously. But you know what I mean? He was sort of joking about being careful about not categorizing how things are as good or bad. Because if we categorize it as bad, we might just keep reinforcing the bad, right? And again, things change, things ebb and flow. That's the way life works. That's the way business works. That's the way the weather works. I mean, we just had a beautiful day yesterday and it's now, kind of dreary today. And I was looking at the little weather app and it looks like it might be dreary and kind of rainy over the next week. Okay, that's the weather. But like yesterday, it just really seemed like spring was here and it was going to be like that forever. Of course, we know seasons change, the weather changes, even in a place where the climate is relatively mild, like where I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. It's not always the same, and that's a beautiful thing, right? So be mindful of the words that you use to describe what's going on because our words have power. And even if we talk about things being challenging, can we talk about it in a way that actually leaves some opening, some space for things to get better? And again, I'm not talking about sugarcoating. I'm not talking about minimizing. I'm talking about telling the truth and being authentic, of course, but noticing how the stories that we tell have a lot of power. Third thing, right? When things show up that seem hard, what if we ask different questions like, how could this be easier? What could I do to get some support? What's a different way to look at this thing? How could I take a step back? I mean, just inquiring into. There was a great question that I shared on an episode last year that I was listening to Mel Robbins' podcast, another podcast that I love. And she had this whole episode about what if it all works out? What if it all works out? What if it ends up being exactly the way I want it to be? What if this is great? What if this is just a step in the process to get me to where I really want to go? Again, those types of questions don't change the circumstance. They change the way we're looking at it. A question that I often ask, and you've probably heard me talk about this on the show. If you've seen me speak live, you've definitely heard me talk about this. But instead of asking, why is this happening to me? Ask, why is this happening, what? For me. Why is this happening for me? That's a different question in relationship to something that's difficult or challenging. So if we can not only pay attention to the words that we use to describe what's going on, what questions could we ask ourselves or our teams or the people around us that might lead us to some different perspectives, some different ways of looking at it? I remember when we were planning our wedding, which we're coming up on our 20th wedding anniversary, our friend Franco, who helped us plan the wedding, who sadly is no longer with us, but Franco was such an amazing human and so full of life and he was just really funny, very opinionated, very passionate. But like we would bump into a problem during the wedding or something we couldn't figure out. And he'd say, we didn't invent this problem. We will figure this out. And I love that saying. I've heard other people say it since then. Franco obviously didn't invent that, but that notion of we didn't invent this problem. Now, look, in the world of AI and the world of new things happening, there's sometimes new issues are popping up. We're going, wow, we've never dealt with this before. Or thinking about having gone through the pandemic several years ago, it's like, yeah, there were a lot of things. And sometimes in life, stuff comes up that is new and we don't know how to deal with it, or we don't have experience dealing with it, I should say. I think about that in parenting all the time. Each stage of parenting, it's like, oh, haven't dealt with this before. But usually, even if it's something new, we didn't invent it. We're not the only ones dealing with it. We're not the only people on the planet asking this question or bumping into this challenge. So, what are other people doing? This is something so simple and practical. I often talk about this with leaders inside of organizations. Like when you run into a people problem, when you run into an issue, there's probably other people at your same level in the organization dealing with some version of that same issue. Have you reached out to them? Have you thought about, how are other people dealing with this? So that leads to the fourth thing. And this is often a step in almost every process that I share with you of things we can do, which is you can ask for help. And it's really important to do that, right? Especially when things seem hard. Because the reality is, some stuff's really hard for me that's not hard for you, and vice versa. And even if it's universally considered hard, it's usually easier for you to help me with my hard thing than it is for you to deal with your hard thing, and vice versa. Have you ever noticed other people's issues and problems and challenges don't seem as big to us? I mean, sometimes they might seem pretty significant, and we might think, oh, wow. I'm grateful I'm not dealing with that, or I don't know how to deal with that, or I don't know what I would do if I was faced with that challenge. And again, that's when we're talking about really big stuff. But the day-to-day stresses, even the things that can be really challenging for us, there's people around us in our families, in our communities, in our organizations, that if we present them with that challenge, they might be able to help us. At least provide some mental, emotional support, some, hey, I got you, I got your back, I'm rooting for you, or even some practical advice. They might be able to help sort it out. You know, one of the things that I love to do is actually talk to people close to me about their finances. Now, I'm not a finance expert and I don't pretend to be, but I've gotten to the point over the years where I really like thinking about and talking about money more for the demystification of it, if you will, more for the, hey, how can we all be more empowered around it? And I'm a big fan of numbers and tracking numbers and looking at numbers, sometimes to an obsessive degree, but I like it because to me, I grew up with a lot of fear around money, a lot of confusion about money. But what I've said to some friends of mine where we've shared some numbers with each other, as scary and vulnerable as that can be, is like, it's just numbers on a page. It's just numbers in a spreadsheet. Like it literally means almost nothing to me when I look at your numbers. And I don't mean that dismissively, but they're just numbers. To us, our numbers often mean a lot. Oh my gosh, that means I'm good or I'm bad or I'm happy or I'm sad or I'm grateful or I'm scared or proud or embarrassed or whatever it is, but it's just numbers and it's all relative, right? So when I look at someone else's numbers, I'm not emotionally triggered by them. I might go, wow, like that's a lot of money, or that's not a lot of money, or that's a lot of debt, or that's a lot of investments, or that's a lot of wealth, or whatever it is. I might have those thoughts and assessments based on the numbers, but like it's not as emotional for me if they're not my numbers, if that makes sense. And so I say that because when we ask for help, when we let other people know, hey, I'm struggling with this, or I'm challenged by this, or this is right now really hard for me, it seems like it might be easier for you. Would you be willing to help me, either with some advice or some perspective shifting, or maybe even some practical, roll up your sleeves and give me a hand with this thing, right? Help me carry this, you know, dresser up the stairs because I can't do it myself, right? Think about that in life. There are certain times when I literally need another human or a few other humans to help me with this thing because I can't do it myself. I can't get the dresser up the stairs and into the bedroom. I need to either hire people to do that or have some friends come over and help me do that because otherwise it's just going to stay on the ground floor or wherever it started. We need each other. So, look, I get that things can be hard sometimes. I get that things might be hard right now for you and things show up in my life that are hard, but what if it doesn't have to be so hard? And what if when it's hard, there's opportunities for us to learn, to grow, to connect, right? So those four things that we can do, right? Drop into the deeper feeling first and foremost, right? Pay attention to the words that we use. Secondly. Thirdly, see if we can ask different questions about the thing. How might it be easy? What if it all works out? How could I get some support with this? Who else has figured this out? Why is it happening for me? All those types of questions, again, that just inquire into shifting our mindset, our approach. And then fourthly, how can we get some support specifically? Who can we ask? Who can we confide in? Who can help us with this thing practically, but also help us remember it's probably not the end of the world. It's probably not the biggest, hardest, scariest thing we've ever dealt with. So those things, as simple as they are, can really help us navigate when things show up that seem really hard or challenging. And maybe we'll realize maybe it's not as hard as we thought. Maybe we're stronger and more resilient than we give ourselves credit for, which is often the case. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I always appreciate it, whether this is the first time you've ever watched or listened to the show, or you've been listening to it for many, many years. Make sure to hit the subscribe or the follow button so you don't miss any future episodes, whether you're watching this on YouTube or listening on your favorite podcast app like Apple or Spotify. There's links in the show notes for ways to connect with me on social media and learn more about me and my work. There's a link below in the YouTube description as well. Best place to connect with me is at our website, which is mike-robbins.com. Until next time, keep bringing your whole self to work, to life, and remember, we're all in this thing together.